This rigging method may be new to some of you, but if you are an avid viewer of Stefan's channel, you have likely heard of this, the hybrid C rig or Carolina rig. A few months ago, he explained how he came up with this and why he has had success with it so far. Essentially, the weight is a swing head or wobble head without the hook. Then tie a few inches of line between the weight and your hook of choice. Matt talks about his preference for using a floating lure on this rig. The one I have here is a full-size Z2, a salt-impregnated Elastec bait. It is more buoyant than traditional plastisol, but doesn't pop to the surface like a cork either. I tried it out with a few different retrieves. Let's start with some small hops. This is one of my favorites. Why? Because it gets the buoyant lure moving. It slides left, right, and up and down with an enticing look. It's a challenge to impart small hops without overworking the lure. The easiest way I found is to either just reel a quick, short burst, like a partial turn of the handle, or to use your wrist to move the rod, not your entire arm. Now let's look at the big hops. If you are wanting to trigger some reaction bites, this is likely the one for you. And notice the weight. It too has drawing power and can pull a curious bass in. These big hops would also be great when working through some taller bottom composition, let's say like vegetation. Now this next one might be my favorite of all of them. I did like the small hops, but this glide or sweeping action looks great. I love how it swims the lure or moves the lure just off of the bottom. I guess you can compare this to a more traditional Carolina rig retrieve. Now, of course, there are lots of lures you could experiment with here as well. But what about the why? Why would you try this and not just stick with a traditional Carolina rig? A great question. Probably the biggest reason would be the feel. With this shorter leader length and small weight, we as anglers are more likely to feel the bite. Lots of times with a Carolina rig, that fish may be on there for a few moments before we know the bass is actually there. And if we're not careful, that can lead to fish getting deep hooked. Now, the other benefit is this can also be worked in more targeted areas. To fish a traditional sea rig, you often need some space. It's great at a covering water type of a technique. But if you want to target a small area, it can be cumbersome to maneuver. Well, no problem with this little hybrid version. Thank you, Matt, for putting this one out there. And hey, if you would like to watch a video on what I feel is the easiest way to master a traditional jig bite, go ahead and check this one out right here. And make sure that you go ahead and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.